Against the Herd podcast. Today we have with us a very special guest known as Bo, or David Boustead, my uncle, who is a meditation practitioner and going to share with us a bit about his story. If you tuned into our last podcast on meditation, we went over a lot of the research surrounding it and how it can make drastic changes in one's brain, and a couple of helpful tips how it can improve your life. So tune into that for information on that. But today we've got Bo here with us, who has been a lifelong practitioner of meditation and has a very good history with it. So he was going to start off kind of sharing his story with us. We'll ask him questions about his practice and perhaps advice for others, and we will go from there.
Okay. Nick had asked me to maybe begin with just saying a few things about myself, and so I thought we'd start out with that. And I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, and in a very kind of a conservative family that church-going Lutheran, and was always was drawn to spirituality, and wasn't always sure how that related to the church, but there was a strong pull there. So when it came time to go to college, I went to a liberal arts college that also offered a pre-seminary curriculum, and so I became involved in that, and I guess it was my second year at college that I had a course in world religions, and that really, I mean, it changed my course in a lot of ways, in a lot of different courses. So now, in addition to really not getting along very well with Roman and Latin, I had another reason to question the path that I was on, because so many of the world religions, especially the Eastern religions, I felt much more of a pull, much more of a draw, kind of being at home. And it just didn't seem like continuing on to be a Lutheran minister would be very, very fair to anybody. So I ended up getting a major in sociology and a minor in psychology. And then I went on to graduate school and I got a master's degree in clinical social work, and began to specialize in psychotherapy. And for a few years, I was on the staff of a mental health clinic in the Chicago area. And then I had my own practice for a few years, office in downtown Chicago and an office in Evanston, Illinois, until I was ready to move up to northern Wisconsin. I had decided that's where I wanted to raise my family, and so built a log home on a lake on about 20 acres of woods in the north.
Literally
woods.
Built from the ground up, Bruce, by the way. Built a log cabin from the ground up.
From the ground up.
God, I love that. I'm someone who I just learned how to build a barn door,
Oh,
and it's my pride and joy.
all right. Well, if you'd been around then, I could have used you. But I spent about 30 years up there until my boys were grown and out of the nest, and I continued my study for that time, with spirituality in general, Eastern spirituality in particular, and Buddhism probably as the home base. But there were no teachers up there. And I just taking things from a book, I had a lot of questions because one of the primary practice that I kept getting pointed back to was meditation. And so well, is this it? Am I doing it right? Is this what's supposed to happen? And it was, I didn't have a lot of confidence, in myself in those ways. So what I did, I then ended up taking an early retirement and decided, and one of the reasons was, one of the primary reasons was to go somewhere where there would be teachers, there would be, and more people that would be more like-minded, and on this kind of path, and meditation path and a spiritual path, and they're very much linked for me. I think that's important to say. And so my wife and I relocated to Madison, Wisconsin. So I've been here for the past 8 years or so. 8 years, is that right, Nick? No, 15 years. Yeah, time goes fast.
It's a big discrepancy right there.
Yeah, I guess I've been with my current teacher, Bruce, for about 8 years, and with this particular sangha, and I think, yeah, that's where that came in. So so that's the backstory. I basically went from having a clinical practice to a spiritual practice in terms of my life's focus.
And I love that so much. And I want to get your thoughts, Bo, in a world where specialization, like it's all about get out of high school, specialize. And you took a liberal arts approach. How did that impact? Did that supplement what you had already felt as a Lutheran and that spirituality that you had? I mean, how big of a player was that liberal arts, um, study for you?
Yeah, I appreciated being able to get a broader, just a broader education, and maybe, and I saw, I guess, always for me, Bruce, I never really saw college as much as a ticket, and I was never really as driven to, a lot of my friends, they were really more interested, and I guess I found out I was kind of the weird one, but they were really, interested in making as much money as they could, or yeah, being able to have a certain kind of lifestyle or something, and that was never that important to me. And really my life education in college, all the school was located in the corner of northeast Iowa, where Minnesota and Iowa and Wisconsin come together, and it's just kind of a rolling hillside and countryside, and there were primarily Midwest people. It wasn't as diverse as the south side of Chicago, although the school was making a concerted effort to become more diverse, and that was just getting underway there, and I appreciated that. But for me, getting to know all these, you know, farm kids, that was a whole different experience for me, and I guess some of us were a different experience for them. But yeah, the specialization, I really preferred just kind of letting things fall into place as they did as I went along, and just getting as many different kinds of experiences as I could.
And I love that as well because, I if I take a step back and I look back, and I went to high school in West Virginia, not a lot going on. And but I always there's just like this feeling that I can't describe it, but you just know that you just know that you're different. You know, like I thought a different way, and I always like I was always in the middle of something in terms of my thinking, like whether it's politics, whether it's a particular a particular topic, because I always found that the truth was somewhere in the middle. And now reading this book called Range, you start to learn that there are more people that aren't specializing right away. In fact, they're trying different things and they're putting themselves out there. And so I really love that. I guess you had mentioned and you had said before that you, I guess, were the weird one because your friends were trying, they were motivated to get to to get more money, but you took the approach of, no, I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust my instincts on this. How hard was that? Like, was it difficult, or was it just, no, this is what I'm going to do, and we're going to see where the chips lie?
I guess it just came. It just came naturally, and I didn't. I, I, as long as I always had, a roof over my head, and food on the table, I really didn't think too much of other kinds of concerns, and I was able to do what I wanted. And then, I mean, I lived in the woods on a lake, and I did, what could be better, and so yeah, it just all worked for me.
Absolutely. And would you mind? So you obviously moved from Chicago area to the north woods of Wisconsin. We're not talking like the border of Illinois and Wisconsin, Bruce. We're talking, northern Wisconsin on a fairly remote lake, and was more remote at that time. Did the meditation practice have anything to do with like your love of nature as well, or how did that play in with being in a very isolated, remote place to raise a family?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting that um, some of the talks you and I have had, Nick, I started thinking about. I never really thought of a connection as much, and I thought so. I thought about that, and that there really is, and the connection is, for me, is that um, being in nature and spending time, in wilderness areas, especially when there's no other people around, no other human beings, um, I I kind of get in a spiritual space or a mental space that's very similar to what meditation does. And as a matter of fact, I think an MRI would probably be able to point out exactly how that works, scientifically. But it has the same kind of impact on me in terms of just kind of calming me down and slowing my mind down from all the chatter. And for me, also it opens my heart. Um, and I feel a kind of a connection to an inner peace, and I get it in both those places. And so it was a hard decision for me to leave the woods because, but in Madison now we live. We've got a home that abuts the University of Wisconsin Arboretum, and as a matter of fact, I'm a volunteer steward. I kind of patrol the paths and 1,500 acres of woods, and so I'm right at home there. I can get lost in the woods when I feel like it, but but the city is hard to feel. Being around a lot of people, and the pace and the energy, it's very different. And so I go to the woods, or I go and I sit. I sit in meditation, and what I find is the longer I meditate, I mean over years, not any single session, really where I am, or even what my circumstances are, it doesn't matter as much. I don't need to be in the woods anymore to get that. It makes it easier, and I still love to do it and do it often. But it's all there in our mind, and by learning how to just access that more, I can attain those states without having to be in a special place or be doing a special thing or having a kind of special experience. It's always right here, right now. I just need to know how to tap into it.
Absolutely, no. That is fascinating, and a fantastic answer to that question that I could not have imagined. Could you dive a bit more into the mechanics of the meditation? Again, maybe different types that you've experienced. Again, some of our listeners may be picturing, is this guy sitting and staring at a blank wall and he's saying that that's like nature? Like it's hard for many to grasp, what is actually happening while you're meditating. Are you thinking about nothing? Are you, counting to a high number? Is it based off feeling? Could you maybe go a little bit into that and how that's changed for you over time or the mechanics of it?
Sure. Maybe one thing I should say up front, and I think I've already said that for me, there's a real spiritual link and that it's really linked together. But I know that's not so for all meditators. I know for some folks that they're not looking for that, and that's fine. But I wouldn't be as of much help to them, except to say that I know people who want to. Some of the practices would be the same, exact same, and some of them would be very different. But some of the basic practices for those folks, if it's wonderful for dealing with stress. And so if somebody wants to learn, they just want to be more focused, they want to be more relaxed, and they want to just have a clearer mind, they want to have a way to kind of feel refreshed or recharged. Meditation can do that. It does do that. And I'm talking about those things, but I'm interested in other things as well. And so I just wanted to make that distinction. So for a long time, I wondered if meditation was essentially, just from all the readings I did, people kept coming back to what you alluded to, Nick, is in terms of the breath. And I know that there are people still that think in terms, even Buddhists, some Buddhists in certain Buddhist traditions, because Buddhists have different traditions, just like many religions do, and they're similar, parallel, but there are differences. And in some of them, meditation, that's what it means. It means initially getting the spine straight is important, and then the body kind of relaxed. That straight spine and a relaxed body, and having get a comfortable posture and my head set in a certain way, and that doesn't change then for the session, and the only thing really with me that wants to move is my eyes, and that initially I always meditated with my eyes closed. My current teacher advocates eyes open. I mean, they don't have to be like wide open. Actually, best if they're just just kind of a very relaxed, loose, general gaze, not a hard focus on anything. And so if my eyes tend to move, that's fine. I'll either leave them in that new place. My head hasn't moved. I'll either leave them in the new place or I'll return to the original place. And I just do everything I do being aware that I'm doing it. But the breath meditation is just simply, and this is the most universal that I have found, is just resting my attention on my breath. That's what I'm aware of. And meditation is really a kind of a one-pointed, as I practice it and understand it, a one-pointed focus on one thing. Our mind is always bouncing around, all over the place, and keeps us internally and externally, all over. Well, this brings it all to one. It all slows down, perhaps sometimes even just stops. And I'm aware of the breath coming into my body as it comes in. I'm aware of the breath leaving the body and focusing only on that as it goes out. I'm aware of a brief pause and then aware of that starting again. And then it repeats. And then it repeats. And then I realize that somewhere along the line, I started thinking about the upcoming baseball season. And, who I would start, my lineup. And just gently bring it back to the breath, wherever the breath is at that moment. And I'm not telling my breath, how quick or how deep or whatever. I just follow it. It leads me. And the in and the out. And so I still do that often for parts, if not entire, meditation sessions. But I do some different things too, because I've learned with this current teacher just how he's taught me a good deal. And one of the things was that what works for somebody at a given point in time isn't going to work for everybody at any point in time, and that we're all different, and we're all also constantly changing, and that's all good and fine, and there's no one right way, and each of us needs to do what's going to work for us, and we know, we'll generally know. And so at the current time, in addition to, again, often the breath is kind of a touching stone, fallback default. I work with mantra. Many people, when they talk about mantra, in traditional religious traditions, there's typically ancient languages used, such as Sanskrit, and it's not only the phrases that are powerful in that language, but the sounds of the syllables are said to resonate, and it really, those sounds on their own tend to reorganize some of our energies and get us in tune. That never particularly had that impact on me. And so what I tend to do is I'll have a word or a short phrase, and I'll repeat those in tune with my breath. So the first part on the in-breath and the second part on the out-breath. And repeat, and repeat, and repeat, and something just keeps going deeper and deeper. And I might stay with one for the entire session, or I might go to a different one, or I might go back just to the breath. And I find over time these phrases or words, they change. Some of them don't. I mean, some of them kind of stick around, always come back or never leave. But most probably they evolve or just change, and that's fine. It seems to be working, and that's all that. I don't need to know exactly how or why that is. So that's a piece. Another piece in Tibetan Buddhism is one of the things is that there'll be visual objects, statues, for instance, or it can be a picture, and they've got very specific ones where everything about in the picture has a specific symbolism and meaning. And I'm kind of once again, kind of a oddball with that. And I found that the traditional ones haven't worked as well for me as I have a character, a monk, actually. And I don't know if he's supposed to specifically be, there was a Buddhist monk, Boustead, back in the 8th or 9th century in China, and then kind of wandered from town to town and through the hillsides. And a lot of people think of him, he's been depicted in many traditions across many cultures, and they often talk of him as being the smiling Buddha or the laughing Buddha. But it's really not a Buddha. It's Buddha. It's this monk. But when I first got that, I got that statue. This hadn't occurred to me for a long time. It was probably more than 50 years ago, and I was being in the Chicago area. I was on North Rush Street, which was kind of a funky area of town back then on the near north side. I don't know if it still is. And there was this shop, and this statue just spoke to me, and just seemed so familiar. It's like there's my uncle or whatever, and so I bought it, and he's kind of been in closets and places he's traveled with me, but just with this over the last 8 years, has just become much more of a prominent, and just the impact of that visualization is he seems to embody he seems to embody an enlightened state. So I'm not, and that state is one of he's so calm and he's so kind, just a loving kindness, and very clear-minded, and he's just content. And what a lot of people don't realize is, when if somebody uses a statue like I do, and so we can just sit and gaze at that statue, for a time, in reverence. It's not like we're worshiping a statue. That's not it at all. Kind of, it's getting in touch with that place in us that's already there. But it's it's dormant. It's more dormant or underdeveloped, but it's in there, and I'm projecting it onto Boustead, and he's there, just projecting it right back onto me. At least that's what I experience. So I can spend a session with him, and and then also imagining, that there's different meditation practices that are spiritual practices that, again, it's so closely linked for me. But there's something called guru yoga. You have to be a little careful. Not supposed to talk about a whole lot of this just in public. But there's a practice that in essence he kind of dissolves into a clear light, and then I inhale that clear light, and we become one. And so that would be the kind of practice too. Various visualization practices, and so those are the primary right now, Nick, that I find myself doing.
And so, with the visualization, it's interesting that you bring this up because I've been down a rabbit hole, and Nick and I have also done a recent podcast on neurolinguistic programming or hypnosis. And what I'm doing right now is I'm understanding where that visualization comes into play, how you can visualize something, how you could speak something out, the power of being able to speak, and then also attaching a feeling to the words as well as the visualization. And I wanted to ask you, for transcendental meditation, that is what is related to me the most. But here's where I mess up, Bo, is I take meditation too serious, and I have to imagine that probably others do as well, right? Everything has to be perfect. If I'm breathing, then there's a yawn, and then I yawn, and then that takes me off my game. I'm not flexible, so when I'm sitting down Indian style, I'm thinking about my hips that are aching right now,
Mm-hmm.
and it is. Am I right in saying that probably myself as well as many others, many of our listeners, that we probably take it a bit too serious, and that, even if it's sitting up against a wall, even if it's sitting on a bolster or something like that, just trying to keep breath, trying to stay focused on that, and not let too many thoughts pop into your head and cut out. Am I right in saying that?
For the most part, it was interesting. I was aware that my meditative practice with visualization, with Boustead, as you were talking, Bruce, what just happens, he pops into my head, and he's just kind of smiling at what you're saying. I mean, he's just smiling, and he doesn't take anything seriously, and he's kind of teaching me that the importance. We don't you don't need to try to keep thoughts out or bring certain thoughts in. What's important is that we be aware of what's happening, and if so. So it's not. It's okay to be taking things a whole lot more serious than Boustead does. The thing is to be aware we're doing it in a non-judgmental way. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just what is right now. And just to have that awareness, that's the focus, is the awareness. Am I doing this right? You have an awareness. I'm worried I'm not doing this right, you know, and for me at least, that tends to release it right there. Do I need to, do I need to change my posture here? Would it be better this way or that way? I'm being concerned. I'm trying to figure out how to, and just be aware of what I'm doing. And what tends to come up for me after going through this, as many tens of thousands of times as I have over time, is that almost all of these questions, the answer is, it doesn't matter. you know, you just be you, but be aware of be aware of you, and be aware of
So it's not quite like golf lessons where, you have to stick the landing on every stroke, on every
just the opposite. Just the opposite.
No, I absolutely love that. And I think another thing that just in my reading, and this was years ago, but enlightenment sounds really, really great. And I have to imagine that a lot of people probably take that as the core focus. They learn about meditation and they want to jump in, and then they want to hit enlightenment right away. I have to imagine that's pretty common in some of the folks that you've mentored or that you have in your study.
Yeah, yeah. Wanting um, for most, some traditions in Buddhism, they don't address reincarnation. Um, it's not clear whether that's not a part of their tradition. But it's so centered on the present moment that that's not any part of it. Tibetan Buddhism, it is, and but that's kind of an accepted part of how things are. So the thing for most people then in this tradition is, as long as I get it this lifetime, but I got to get it before I die, before my body dies, and yeah. So usually they're a little more patient than you, but it's got to be this lifetime, uh, and yeah, yeah.
I'm also curious, well, because I'm a practitioner of jujitsu, and one thing that I've been working on is to be able to have it's like almost like a transcendental moment before I actually go onto the mat. And I know obviously on the I think just Eastern medicine, um, Eastern Eastern religion, spirituality has always been spot on, and it's resonated with me. Um, on going back to I touched on it before, but transcendental meditation, one would maybe think that, if I'm trying to and maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, is I'm trying to put myself in a different, I'm trying to put myself on a beach, right? I'm trying to visualize and put my family where we grow up in Spain on the Iberian Peninsula. But does that take away from, you know, the essence of meditation, of just being?
Yeah, well, I guess what I've found with that is, as long as I realize that I'm not there now, um, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to get an experience of being there without being there, and that's what I'm doing, and I'm aware of that. And then if there's a little, that change in the mental state and so forth, and then just aware of that, um, and and getting back to there's not a right way or a wrong way. You're you're trying to take yourself there. That's all it is your object for meditation. And it doesn't matter what your object is. That sounds like a wonderful one to me. And so you're just going to be with that. That's where your awareness is going to be. That's what you're going to focus on. That's a wonderful one. And just being aware of what's happening as you're doing it. Does that make sense? Does that address that?
That it certainly does.
Fantastic. And I was curious. We've talked. You brought up awareness a good bit, and that's linked a lot with meditation. One thing Bruce and I actually struggled with in doing research for our meditation podcast was finding a definition of it. There were so many, and so varied. I was just curious, just from your perspective, right? If you were writing the dictionary, how would you define like meditation? What would you, define it as? If possible. I know it's a tough one because there's a lot of ways you can go with it. But I was just curious what your, phrasing of it would be.
Yeah, it would. Right now, in the moment, I would say it's an exercise in, fully focusing one's attention on a specific object. And to the exclusion, of all else. And I say object, but that can be the things we're talking about, the various things. But I'm just focusing on that one thing. So it's maintaining that specific focus with full awareness of what's happening during that experience. That as I'm focusing, I'm experiencing what that's like. If I drift away from that focus, as soon as I'm aware of that, then I'm in awareness again, and I bring myself back to it. So it would be along those lines, Nick.
I love that, and you said a very important and a key word, and you said exercise. And I think it's important for listeners to understand, and please correct me if I am wrong, Bo, but this isn't a do it once, come back to it later, and all of a sudden you're going to be able to slip into that state of mind. This takes work.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe work's not the right word, right? This takes
No, I
this
think
takes
it is.
effort.
I think it is.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And something important to know about that, I think, is that it's not a linear kind of experience. I've gone days or weeks in my meditation, and it's a daily meditation practice, generally multiple times a day, and it's like, what am I doing? Oh, what did I convince myself of? This doesn't make sense. I'm just confused. I am really confused. I still get frustrated sometimes. I still get angry sometimes. I thought I understood. I had a purpose in life. I had a direction. And what is it? What is this about? Why have I wasted all this time? And then all of a sudden that cloud will pass, and I get back into the track, and oh no, I'm home again, and this really is working. And as a matter of fact, I'm farther along than I was before I left, a few days ago or whenever. I somehow, going through that experience, coming back. Every time I come back, it's like I get grounded a little deeper in the path, and the connection with that inner self is a little bit stronger. So it's like 3 steps forward and 1 step back, but it is forward, and it keeps going in that way. Did I get off on a tangent, or did that direct?
No, God, that is, can't describe to you how powerful that is because, there are just so many people that they pick up on things. There's this sense of instant gratification, and I don't think it's just in our generation. I think that we've had this, right? Like we get that kick from it. But it's important to know that even someone like yourself who is a daily practitioner that has put in years and years of effort, you still experience the same type of human emotions, right? That doesn't necessarily go away, but it's important to have that grounding of knowing where you started, and that, yeah, if you do take that 1 step back, but you've already taken 3 steps forward, so you're still significantly further than what you were. You're being a human, and it's important to relish in the fact that you get to experience this human feeling.
That's you're really spot on with that. You're really spot on, and I think, building on that a little bit, and this is good. The most important thing, especially if somebody's relatively new, is just showing up for it. Even feel like, what, I've set aside this time is going to be a time. This is a one time of the day that I'm going to do it for sure. But man, I could really use another hour of sleep, or I'd really like to see how that book turns out. I'd really like to call my friend. You only set aside one time a day for certain. Show up. Just show up. And at some point in time, you'll understand why that was so important. And you'll realize the fruits of that. And then, as I mentioned, when we go through that step back, to acknowledge that and to not give up or just to drop it, but to realize, no, actually I just need to keep showing up, and a lot more experience than me. They've told me about this. They've told me to expect it. They went through it. And then their teachers went through it, and their teachers' teachers, because these are traditions that are thousands of years old, and that's yeah, and that's a big part of how it works and why it works.
One, well said. And you had mentioned numerous times before, but also just a second ago, with speaking to others, and I have to imagine probably your teacher as well. I'll give you an example. I do coaching, or I have a coach, personal development coach, and I tried it about a year and a half ago, and I quickly realized that this is very beneficial to me, and that no matter the price, I will always have a coach because I find a lot of value in it. Tell me how. Tell me what changed when you had a practitioner or a teacher in meditation. Can you describe where that shift was, what that shift looked like?
Yeah, I different teachers along the way were somewhat different. I think I'll stick with my current teacher. Um, he's he actually his primary monastery is in Tibet. That's his headquarters. Um, but he's got this this spiritual community has a number of sub communities, and one here in Madison, a really flourishing one, and they're across all the continents. There's actually there are dozens of these sanghas or spiritual communities, as we call them, that comprise his, the main one. And so he's the teacher for people of many different cultures and languages. He's become, I would say, fluent in English. What do you think, Nick? Is he
I
fluent?
agree. Yes. Oh, he's definitely fluent. He has a very unique way of speaking English, but it
Yes, yes.
certainly gets the message across.
But he's a role model. Bruce. I find he's a role model, and he is somebody that I can relate to. I feel I have a rapport with. I mean, I only see him in person maybe a couple of times a year. He travels around the world, so he'll travel to the United States, and often Madison, often Minneapolis. Those are the two primary places. He's been in Chicago, but also weekly webinars with him, and and teachings that he puts up. And I found that, so here's somebody that I had a rapport with, and I developed a feel for, and he's somebody that I respect and I trust. And so that's what I needed then to kind of open up to him. So that, okay, I trust you, I respect you, you know a lot more than I do, and so I'm really open to being led by you, and so finding that then if I'm willing to surrender somewhat and to move my pride out of the way. Okay, you tell me what to do, and now, I mean, there could come a point that if bad things seem to start to happen and they keep happening for a long time, and it seems like somebody's getting hurt, well, that all bets are off. You don't. And he'd be the first to say that. You don't always trust your inner guru above all. But if this person is in harmony with that, that then you can trust somebody who's been where you are and who's out for your best interests, and is going to be able to be a guide along the path. And so what's important is it's a good person for you, somebody that you can respect and trust. And as long as you got your teacher, guide, whatever you call the person, then it's going to be really important to be in it together.
Yeah, that is fantastic. No, a fantastic answer. Because again, the whole point of this podcast is to introduce people to meditation and hopefully help them find find their own path to it, or at least encourage that. I want to be mindful of time. It's getting a little late, but I do have one kind of parting question. We had mentioned before how meditation can help. You have these dark storm clouds pass over, and in society today we have a lot of storm clouds in people's lives, right? And anxiety and depression are on the rise, especially in younger generations. And as somebody with a background and degrees in psychology and helping people with their mindsets and such, I'm curious your opinion on maybe back when you used to practice, or now what you see in yourself and others. Has meditation been, or how has meditation been a help for maybe some struggles, mental struggles that people go through ordinarily, anxiety and stress. I'm not, meaning for you to say you can cure all mental illness by if everybody meditated. Of course, that is not the answer. But I am curious: are there some, people who are anxious, or have you seen it impact, different, mental ailments in your time?
Yeah, that's interesting. My teacher talked about the fact that for himself, when he was a child, about 7 years old, that he used to get anxiety and panic attacks, which is pretty rare in Tibet. And he still has trouble. He talked about how long it took him to understand how people in the West, I mean, there is no word for low self-esteem over there. And when people get down on themselves and criticize themselves, he couldn't quite get that. But he's worked so hard, not just on his language, but he works with neuroscientists and psychologists and physicists, and he really wants to get a full marriage of cultures. I mean, he's not. This isn't just his way. This is the way that we're all on. And so I'm trying. And so your question about that, Nick, was bring me back to that. I was getting off a little bit.
No problem. Was, with common mental ailments, anxiety, depression, have you
Yeah.
seen meditation affect or be able to help in those areas
Yeah.
as well?
So as he talks about that's that's what cured him of his anxiety attacks, and as a 7 or 8 year old, and that's when he realized that this is all that his father had said that it was, who was a teacher, himself a master. And what I've found is that I've had difficulties with anxiety and depression at times in my life. I would probably, under certain circumstances, causes and conditions, as the Buddhists would say, could fall to that again. But I don't know that that's true. If I did, it would take a more. I mean, it has just been so much longer now. I mean, I haven't had it in the full 8 years that I have been, really with this. But what has happened over time, I just find that my mind is just calming down. And as my mind has calmed down, kind of my heart has opened up, and my mind has also cleared up. And somehow I put things in perspective. I have more of a sense of purpose and direction. And for me, that was one of the things, as I put it together now, that was what led to a lot of the fears and anxiety and depression. It's like, well, nothing means anything. I mean, what is this about? And somehow, the deeper I get inside me, I don't know that I can put it in words, but I don't need to. I can live it, and it's all divine. It's all sacred. It's all work. It's all one, and it's all in harmony if I'll just get myself out of the way and connect with things on that level. And it's much more difficult to get depressed or to get anxious. Like I said, I would think, I don't know, I would imagine it could still happen, but I don't think it would be as it would take a whole lot more, and that's already there, proven, and it wouldn't last as long or go as deep, because I'm just calmer and keeping things in, things just are naturally, the nature of things is not to be, I truly believe this, is not to be depressed, not to be anxious. And we just got to get back to our natural selves. And meditation is one way there.
Wow. Couldn't have said it better myself. That is a fantastic piece, and we sincerely thank you. I know I'm even more excited about meditation now, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners may be as well. Near the end of our podcast, one thing we usually do for our guests is we allow them to plug their website or book. We've had a couple folks on with books, but I was wondering if you would feel comfortable sharing the name of your teacher and perhaps some ways folks may may find him, with the understanding that he is not a purely meditation, that there is a large spiritual element to it. But if people wanted to explore more about your teacher, how might they go about finding his teachings?
Oh, okay, his his name is Youngi Mingyur Rinpoche. Rinpoche just means master, but it's Mingyur, and his worldwide community is Tergar, Tergar, and there are many people, maybe most of the people who are a part of this worldwide community, do it almost all online, except for maybe occasional retreats. They'll take a retreat. He'll come somewhere near them, or some people who are able to, they would travel to him, but people can connect with him from anywhere, and he's got it set up. He's truly dedicated. His whole mission is just to provide the opportunity for people to really experience the spiritual sides of themselves, particularly through meditation. And I think that he would probably really resonate with a lot of people. I think probably his most famous book was The Joy of Living, which was a bestseller. But that if people just explore Tergar, and that they can learn about that. And as I said before, what's important is finding a teacher that works for, everybody's got to find somebody that really clicks for them, and it won't be the same person for everybody. And if people just Google meditation classes and they put in their town, or their city, people who say, I wish I had something like that near me, most of them will probably be surprised that there are places near you, near them. And it's just a matter of finding somebody that's going to work for you, for all of us. Yeah, but thanks for giving me an opportunity to share that, because I think it might help somebody.
Absolutely. Well, at the very least, it certainly helped us. Again, even as somebody who knew a lot of these things, it was fantastic to hear your thought process and your expanded thoughts on a lot of them. So, like I said, thank you. We thank you very much for your time, and as always, we hope everybody stays against the herd.